Welcome to the first ever edition of something like Conda Community Updates. This first time we're being joined by Filipe,
Hi there.
who is one of the first people to start conda-forge.
Well, I can't say I was one of the first to start. conda-forge starts by itself, and Phil Elson. I was in the room at the right time. Let's say this.
But that's something.
Yeah.
I think I only joined probably 5 years after or something like this. When was it started, actually?
So here's the whole thing. Any history, we can date as far back as we remember, or we can do some research. And I'm going to use my memory here, but some people can remember even further back or remember things different. But there was a time back in 2012 when Conda and Wheels were merging. The whole PyData discussion was very heated. And I had just finished Google Summer of Code, and I applied to go to PyCon. I got a scholarship. I was super lucky to share a room with Jake Vanderplat, who was at the famous meeting where the whole Conda continuum and things started, and the whole PyData and Unfold things started. So he was telling me firsthand these things. I wasn't at the meeting, though. I just saw the recordings later. And at that time, Olivier Giselle, which I believe is one of the maintainers of scikit-learn, he had this whole setup to use Eptheater to build wheels or compiled stuff for Windows, which was crazy, but it worked. A few years later at SciPy, around 2014, Phil Elson had this idea of creating Conda packages using CIs, built on top of these ideas from Olivier Giselle. And I jumped at that because I work for the government. At the government, people use Windows, mostly because of contracts. People use Macs because they buy their own personal Macs. And some hardcore developers use Linux. How can we install a homogeneous environment in all that variety of platforms, right? It was a mess. It was really, really hard. And especially in my field, the oceanographers were still locked in MATLAB, mostly because of that. So Phil Elson at the time worked the UK Met Office, which is kind of similar to NOAA, where I worked in the US. And he started it by himself, like, let's build these wheels there. And he built the whole suite for his job, which had a huge overlap with my job. And I said, you know what? Can I just piggyback on that and add more packages? And I said, sure. And in 2015, conda-forge started. Pretty much Phil had like 15 packages that they needed in the UK Met Office, and I had like 1,000 more that I needed and I use.
Wow. So it came from a very scientific background, and I think you also have a scientific background, right?
I do. I'm a physical oceanographer by training. Phil Wilson was a computer scientist, but he worked for people that had the same background as me. And it's super hard because our main problem is installing things. Our softwares, they are mostly Python nowadays, but they are Fortran extensions, C++ extensions, on the hands of people who have no idea what they're doing. Don't take me on a bad note on this, but scientists, they don't know how to code. They're not trained. I was not trained. Most of the time, I don't know what I'm doing. And I keep Googling and trying to fix packages and trying to make things easier for the next generation. I still remember in grad school when I spent a whole week trying to compile GDAL. Oh my God. It's still a pain point today.
Yeah, I heard so many stories about GDAL being very hard to compile and install. And yeah, big pain. So I always thought there were 3 people involved in the founding of conda-forge.
Well, John found us right after, and John worked also at a research institute, and I think it was about 6 months after, or maybe a year, but it was right after we started. John will probably be mad because I don't remember the name of the institute, but I believe it's health related, or they work with diseases. So he added a bunch more packages for the scientific stack. And this is where we started leaving the meteorological and oceanographic scenario to a larger scientific scenario.
Nice. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of overlap. Even though you were sort of doing things specific to your scientific domain, a lot of people probably, a lot of the underlying stuff, is always shared, like the BLAS libraries or Python or I don't know, bzip2. So yeah,
it's everywhere.
that creates. I think you guys managed to create like a gravitational pull towards other. And I think that's also interesting because from my perspective, what I've observed is that most people sort of gravitate towards like one big channel instead of everyone doing their own little channels. And I think conda-forge that is one of the things that conda-forge has managed to do very well in terms of scaling everything and scaling the infrastructure and going through a bunch of evolutionary changes.
There are many things that are not sustainable about have your own channel. Like at first, I had the I use channel, and Phil also had the UK Metas channel, and I believe John had his own solution for Janila Labs. Of course, when we joined forces, it was much easier. We could share technology, we could share knowledge, we could share infrastructure. The whole idea when Continuum started of having your own channel is based on the premise that you have an IT person just to build packages for you. And most institutions do not. They have a grad student that will leave in a few years when he completes his thesis. Sharing resources is great. conda-forge, now it's like a well of knowledge for packaging. I just go straight on GitHub and Google something, and I found things that I had no idea even existed.
And it's almost structured data.
Yes.
If there was no Jinja. But yeah, do you have some recollections of the history of conda-forge, like maybe some of the other changes that occurred during the, what is it now, 9 years, something?
9 years, yes.
Yeah.
There are many big changes. And before I talk about the changes per se, because I may not remember all of them, I'm going to talk about how those changes happen, because this is more important to me than the change itself. conda-forge is volunteer-based. And all the changes, all the shifts that we had was thanks to a volunteer that showed out of the blue and said, hey, this is annoying me. Can I make it better? Yeah, sure. And then boom, all of a sudden, conda-forge was 100 times better thanks to that volunteer that showed up. But there are many others. For example, when John started and he started adding packages that are not metrological and oceanographic, and with him, a lot of other people came right after him, and conda-forge started creating its contributor base. I think he was the first. When Marius started, and Marius also at the time worked at something related to health, cancer research, and he pretty much revamped our whole CI system. At the time we were abusing Circle CI, we had like a 1100% over the limit, and he revamped everything for us to use Azure. He used his contact at Microsoft, and he wrote the whole scripts and everything. It was a huge hit because it was much faster, and we still use those today. And then the bot, of course, because updating all those recipes yourself is a huge task. I actually started the very first version of the bot, which sucked so much that never went online. And then we got CJ and a student, a Google Summer of Code student that I can't remember his name. They both put the bot together, which is now maintained mostly by Matthew. The bot is still one of our weakest points because it's always one single person, and it's probably the most important piece of infrastructure that we have.
And I heard it runs on like one Heroku server for $7 or something like that.
Yes.
Then,
it's funny because it's probably always cheapest and most expensive piece of technology that we have, because we don't pay for anything else.
I think conda-forge has found ways of like sort of finding infrastructure that can be used.
Yeah.
Sometimes in ways that might not have been intended, but
can be used, can be abused. I mean, now with the CrowdStrike incident, our badge is no longer that important, but we broke GitHub. Okay, CrowdStrike broke the world, but we broke GitHub once.
At least once. I think we're also supposed to stop using that one big repository as a database or something like that.
Oh yeah, it was never designed to do that. And it's right in front of me when you wrote Mamba, Micro Mamba, and everything, because Conda build was starting to get very unsustainable, and the solve times were getting unsustainable. And even though this is in the past now, we're working on newer things, the change to libsolve for solving packages was huge. And conda-forge created that problem. because being the devil's advocate here, Conda was not slow to solve what it was designed to solve. It was never designed to solve a huge package, a huge repository, a huge channel, right? conda-forge, with all the past versions in there. Like if you do like every Linux distribution where we trim things based on date, we could be using conda solvers still today. But the good thing is that we never had to trim, we never had to compromise. We just got a faster solver, thanks to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can also repeat the story how I got there, because at some point I tried to get all the ROS packages, so robot operating system, on conda-forge actually, initially at least. And I thought this would never like it's 3,000 packages or something like this. And at the time, maybe conda-forge had 10,000 or something. And I thought it was never going to work because it was unsustainably slow, the conda build thing. And the SAT solving was the slowest part, right? Like it was not the downloading of the packages or downloading of the repo data or anything like that. It was just like the solving itself. And yeah, that was the whole motivation for the libsolve work.
It's always like that, right? You need to scratch your own itch and end up solving a problem for everybody.
But now I'm actually excited about one more change that we're doing for the scalability of conda-forge, because right now the repo data, I think on Linux, you have to download 40 megabytes or something like this when you start off. Yeah. And so hopefully with the sharded repo data, which is actually an idea that has been in the Conda code base for maybe 5 years or something like this. And it's not really an original idea from us. This will improve. And sharded repo data is basically, instead of having to download the whole index of all the packages, you not only per name, and then recursively fetch everything you need based on that. And so,
yeah, hopefully that will make things much faster.
Yeah, for the next 10 years. And then we have to come up with something new.
I hope I'm no longer in this field by then.
No, we need you.
I'm not doing anything anymore. The very few things I developed for conda-forge are very tiny code changes in the very first version of Conda Smith. I bought a version that never went online and those things. My wife usually makes fun of me. I'm the idea guy that never do anything. I just keep poking others. Hey, I have this idea. Can you do it for me?
But I think also the other sort of initiators of conda-forge, they're not really longer around, right? At least to my knowledge.
Sadly, Phil went to work with particles at CERN for some reason. I never forgave him for that. John stayed. John changed jobs, but he's still there, helping mostly with the NVIDIA CUDA stuff. I think those are the two originals. We had a second generation that really helped move things along, like Jonathan Helmuth, Mike Sarahan, Eric Dale, and all that. They were a huge help. They are pretty much the bulk of conda-forge, like Marius, and for many years.
Yeah. I think that's also the way open source works, right? Like you have maybe generations of people that come and do some things, and then things move on, things change.
And I don't know, a gramp old man here. Like I miss all these people, and I miss working with them, and I miss the meeting. But the truth is, the new ones are doing a way better job than we did. We have to be honest. That's the truth. I don't like to admit it, but that's the truth.
And do you have some
space for them? Sorry.
Do you have some anecdotes from back in the days? Like I think I've heard things about SciPy and famous meetings at some taco place or something like this. I don't really know.
Oh yeah, we used to do that. We went to Austin, and there is, oh my God, I forgot the name of the taco place. Torches. and we used to do our meetings there. Really, really good places. There are some anecdotes, but I think I already told them, like the time we broke GitHub was fun, or getting had like 11,000% over the limit on Circle CI and pretty much breaking the whole thing, breaking the whole thing. What else? My memory is failing me, but we had some fun.
Yeah, where were you this year at SciPy?
I didn't go. I'm no longer in the conference circuit. Like during the pandemic, a lot of things changed for everybody, of course, but I had two other big changes. I bought a really old house, and I spent most of the time renovating it, and I had a son. My wife used to joke that we're a single couple, like we're a couple with a single life, very free. And all of a sudden we're a married couple because now we have kids and we need to be there for the kid. And I pretty much don't do any more conference vacations or things like that. Now my vacations are at Legoland.
Well, that's nice too. This year at SciPy, they had an interesting thing, which was a teenage track.
Oh, cool.
So when your kid is old enough, you can bring it for the teenage track.
Yeah, I think they used to have that in Austin as well, but it was the week before SciPy.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know. I wrote down a few more questions about other things. I think you're from Brazil, right?
Yes.
And actually, I've worked with quite a few Brazilians over the years. And there seems to be an open source scene and the hotspot for Conda and conda-forge things. I was just wondering about that.
Well, the conda-forge, I think it's almost similar to the seed of migration, like when some people move to a new country and then a lot of people from that country goes because they know someone is already there to help them out. And I think the conda-forge is mostly because of that, because I was there, or the Brazilians felt comfortable to come to it.
Yeah.
But the open source scenario, on the other hand, no, that's true. It's booming and it's great. The government that we have now, and we had the same government a few years ago, always saw open source as the future, and they want to change everything inside the government to be open source. They had the 2 conferences that were kind of supported by the government. And I think that's great. And my hometown, the town where I was born, but the town where I live, has a really good open source scenario. It's called Florianópolis. It's South Brazil. They have many companies that rely on open source, hire open source developers. And even Consite hires a bunch of people from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is a good scenario. It's definitely not the same as the German government or the Swiss government, who are doing more strong mandates towards open source and financing open source, but it's better than most of the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think governments really need to step up and help fund like open source infrastructure and open source in general, because yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing all the time is open source not being really sustainable. I think we've experienced it a few times with conda-forge as well.
I mean, I almost saw the end of conda-forge like multiple times throughout these years, and I was afraid, because if this is over, I'll have to go back building packages by myself for my day job only. And it's not only a sad reality, because a lot of people will lose a good resource, but also I don't want to do it.
Yeah. I think we are pretty reliant on a few like big tech companies being generous with us and giving us free CI resources and things like this, but maybe it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for government's funding for open source.
Yeah.
Relying on VC money or big tech companies, it's okay for a while, but it's not sustainable.
Maybe from your day-to-day job, like how are you actually using Conda packages?
There are multiple fronts. Like sometimes just to keep a service alive, right? Like we have servers and we need to install packages and create a Docker machine and put that thing out in the cloud. Sometimes they're actually day-to-day scientist environments, research environments. I can need to install this scientific package to do analysis X, and how do I install it? Most of the time I'm on Slack from my day job or communities associated to my day job, and people just ask, I need to install this, how do I do it? And I have to add it to conda-forge first and then tell them, Conda install that. And they're like, oh, this is magic. It's so easy, so cool.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how the sausage is made, right? Very recently, we got this person who wants to do a C-type binding to a Python package that wraps C++ code, right? And I kept testing it, and it works on my machine. And of course, it didn't work on his machine. And then I didn't know this, that symbols are not exposed. So you can't do that. You need like the DL spec.
That's very strange.
And this is a cool thing about conda-forge and being a well of knowledge. I had no idea. I dropped on our Element chat channel. Izuru answered me right away. I was able now to Google a specific thing, and we did it. We updated the package, put it on conda-forge, and boom. Now a whole research center in Australia that uses Windows can expose that function on C types and do what we call neutral ocean calculation. That's super important for climate models. So you see like that very small C++ technical detail that only people with that training know, like you or Zuru, and that trickling down all the way to climate science. And in my opinion, that's the beauty of conda-forge.
Yeah, I think that maybe can also be a little motivation for new people joining. You can have a big impact. Maybe stop climate change by fixing some C++ libraries.
You see.
Where do you see the future of conda-forge? Like, do you have any high dreams or wishes? Or
I guess if I had a high dream for conda-forge is to get like a government funds for it. There is this software called GMT, like a generic mapping tool, if I'm not mistaken, that from day one, they got NSF fund from the United States. And the person that created it worked his whole life on that thing with very good sums of money from NSF. There is a catch though. GMT was right at the beginning used for oil, gas and oil research. So there was an interest there. But yeah, I'll do something like that for conda-forge, so we don't have to be afraid of losing CI servers. Like we had a scary moment this past weeks where Azure cut us off without really telling why, and everything halted.
I think we recently had another sort of short but an outage from Azure because they said that we triggered some sort of abuse prevention, which is something that we can't really control because feedstocks are sort of on their own, and some feedstocks maybe trigger 100 jobs or something for many different builds of Python and CUDA and whatnot. And I can understand that it looks a bit like maybe abuse.
And we've had funds and we've paid for the service, that would not happen.
I think one of the things that I would find really amazing is if more companies would publish their software on conda-forge, let's say, even if it's not supposed to be redistributed. Like the MSVC compiler is one of the things that I've been trying to get someone at Microsoft to help us, but hasn't worked out yet.
Yeah, I mean, if they do that, if they find a way to do their own end user agreement and all that, it'll be great as well. I have a similar use case for that. In ocean sciences, we need the Intel for a train compiler, and we can ship it on conda-forge because then we can optimize the ocean models to compile with that and run them like a little bit faster. Although I'm getting old, all this is when I was in grad school. I just saw some recently development where someone was running a pure Python ocean model super fast using Numba and machine learning. Super cool work.
Yeah, I think Fortran is one of the things, it's still a big part of at least scientific computing, and always a bit of a pain, I believe, to get running. And I think the compilers, like there's a lot of commercial compilers and then there's Fortran, but I'm not really sure what the story is on Windows and what we're actually using because I'm not super involved with.
Oh, it's super hard. There is Flang. You can use Fortran via MSys or the Intel Fortran compiler.
So far, Flang and Intel haven't been really options for us, right? Like we couldn't really use it on conda-forge yet.
I don't really know the status of that, but I know it didn't move forward as I hoped.
I think the last thing I heard was that Flang was being considered for SciPy or something like this, but well.
And there is that, like we can adopt it in conda-forge if SciPy can't be compiled with it.
And if you do you have ideas where you want to improve things for conda-forge, let's say? And
I have like small ideas that are not really that big, but the one is big. Like there's always automation. We can always improve automation. And one small one that I would love to see implemented is Conda and conda-forge is Python agnostic, but most of our packages are Python. And PyPI has the yank method, which they copied from us from the mark as broken method. It would be nice if that was automated. Like if someone yanks a package on PyPI, it's automatically marked as broken in conda-forge. The more we remove the humans, the better. Another one that also requires automation, and we're almost there. But to finish, we would definitely need the new recipe spec to be out there. is a full recipe regeneration. If there is a new version, suppose the person changed the license, changed the metadata, like the URLs, not only the dependencies. We right now have a very good way of figuring out the dependencies, but it would be nice if we regenerate the whole recipe. Like the license change, here's the new license. The URL change, here's the new URL. Like a full recipe regeneration. And the third one is kind of biggish and maybe would never be implemented. The best thing about the conda-forge model is the feedstock. It's the distributed model, but it's also a weak point in some cases. I'd love to see that being maybe more flexible for ecosystem stuff. Like, so we actually have the Xorg, the KDE, and other ecosystems. There are a bunch of smaller packages. It would be nice if those would be in a single repository.
Right.
Those and only those. Like there is a whole feedstock that's called KDE and builds the whole stack of KDE. Because then you can do them in order. There is no race conditions. There are a lot of common things in common configuration that will be right there in that single place. It'd be like the best of both worlds, the mono repo versus the distributed repo.
I really like the last point of yours. I think that's something that I've also been like kind of thinking about because, for example, I looked into updating the Xorg stack and it's pretty scattered and things are very similar, but you would have to like go in many different repositories and do migrations and like, you know, make sure things work. But I hope that's something like we are actually experimenting with a concept that we're calling like make your own forge in a way for this whole rattler build thing. And then you can have multiple folders and you can basically tell rattler build to look at this as like a recipe dir. And Conda build also had a similar sort of functionality, but it didn't really work well because of the way Conda build works. It was very slow. So hopefully with rattler build we could fix that, and maybe we could do something what you're describing with like having something like a mono repo that publishes a number of packages.
Yeah, an ecosystem, right? Like you mentioned ROS. I believe ROS would be another application for that. It's the whole ecosystem. It can be seen almost as a single package.
I think for ROS you would run into a few different problems because of the number of packages and then CI runtimes and whatnot. But yeah, if we had more than 2 cores, it would make a difference. Maybe you have some memory of some of the nice things that people said to you for like working on starting conda-forge.
Well, this is funny because yes, there are a lot of nice things that were said to me from scientists saying thank you to people that had no idea how to install something and then their whole research was solved. But the one that I chose is the most random one. I was at Seattle during Ocean Hack Week, which is an event that my day job supports, teaching machine learning to ocean scientists. I love REI. They have the flagship store there. I went to the REI with my conda-forge t-shirt because I just left the event. And a guy on the 3rd floor, because they had like this whole hollow thing that you can climb, shouted to me, "Hey, thank you for conda-forge." He had no idea who I was. It was so super random that I really liked it.
I think that's the kind of appreciation that open source people love.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, would you have any sort of tips or ideas for new people to join conda-forge, or like what should we do as a community to make it more welcoming?
This is a hard one because open source as a whole, it kind of starts to wear on you, right? And to take its toll. And I may be not in a very good phase for that. It is a very welcome community. Don't get me wrong. conda-forge is a very welcome community. It's super easy to go from a user to a contributor by just reporting a problem, just supporting people who are doing things for you for free. And then you can dip your toes in updating a package, which is not that hard, or fixing a metadata here and there. And who knows, maybe the next step we're going to be building GDAL.
Yeah. Then you made it into the woods.
Yeah. Now you're one of us.
I think you added actually a question to that list of questions that we have if we should talk about Pixi. Was it you or was it me?
I added it. I want to talk about Pixi. Do we have time?
Sure, we have time.
The first thing that I want to say about Pixi is I promised you that I was going to try when you release the first version. And I didn't. The main reason why I didn't was like all those changes in my life, and changing to a new thing was hard. I did have it installed, and I never remember. It was such an old version that I was going to try the self-update, but the self-update didn't exist. So I had to reinstall it. Said, you know what? I'm going to do that with Pixi, just to dip my toes on it. And it was super cool, super easy. I was able to create an environment or a project, right? I'm biased towards the environment. And this is the things that I would like to talk, especially with you. And I was able to create kind of an entry point to run, to call, and then create the map, and things ran smoothly. But coming from a scientific background and how scientists work, you have to understand, we're coming from MATLAB. Like, I'm one of things where we just throw all the packages and software in there. Just going to environments was already hard. People wanted a single environment with everything, or at least a kitchen sink environment that could share. And going to a project-based idea, it's even harder. It's the next step. It is the right step for reproducibility purpose, but it's hard to change your mindset. And actually, this is one of the very first complaints that I made about Pixi, and you created a way to activate the environment. And it's in there, it works already. The packages cache is within the project directory, right?
The cache, not necessarily, no.
No.
The cache is in a different place than Conda's, but it's usually like in your home folder, we make I think it's called Rattler, because that's the underlying sort of library that we're using. And we share that with Rattler build, for example. But the cache should be in your home folder. We do use a slightly different structure than Conda, and so we like separated this.
Because I remember the directory went from like 40 megabytes to 2 gigabytes, and I thought that the packages were there.
No, I think that's just, so we do the same thing as Conda, or almost the same thing, where you hard link the package data from the cache. But instead of using a hard link, if your file system supports it, and I'm not sure what computer you're on, but Btrfs on Linux or the APFS or what it is on macOS, they support something called reflink. And the reflink is a copy on write. So that's like one step better than hard linking, because when you change a file that is hard linked anywhere, like in either the package cache or in your environment, it will change all sort of instances or links of that file. But if you use this copy on write linking or ref linking, then if you change it in your environment, it will not sort of change. It will, at that point when you change it, it will make a copy, which is kind of nice.
That probably doesn't work on Windows though.
I think it does if you use this dev drive, which is one of the new features, where they, I believe, use something called ReFS or RiserFS. I'm not actually very sure about this, but I think anyways, like if you use Windows, you should definitely try out dev drive, because it's supposed to be a lot faster.
Right. But here's the things that I liked. I liked the log file. I liked that I could just update it by doing pixls. Like I saw that the default was for Linux, because it's a Linux machine. I said, oh, no, I need a log file that's multi-platform. I added the platforms, and how do I update it? And then I typed pixls. Oh, it just updated.
Yeah.
I did like the project-based idea, because I teach people to use common environments that way, although I still need to activate an environment, because I need to share environments for multiple projects. There is still a use case for that. The files in the directory, I can understand now, but I would still prefer to not have anything in there. Sometimes we share on networks, but I think you have an option for that, right? To not
you have an option to create the environments basically somewhere else where you want on your disk, instead of in the project directory.
Yeah, and just keep pixi.toml and pixi.log file. And what else? I did have that problem, but I need to research when I want to do Pixi run with a shell script.
Right.
Is that possible? Or was I abusing the system?
You can do, I think if you just do bash foo.sh or something like this, that would work. That works. We are using, in Pixi, we're using something called Dino Task Shell, which is sort of a project from the Dino. It's like the Node.js thing, but with TypeScript and whatnot. And they have similar problems with the they have these package JSON files, or I don't know what Dino has exactly. Inside of the package JSON, you can also have like scripts that do tasks and whatnot. And so we use the same thing. And the nice thing about it is that it works on cross-platform, and you can use the same syntax for doing some shell-like things on Windows as well. It is missing a few features as well, which, for example, it doesn't have if and else and while or for loops and these kind of things, which is something that we're actually quite curious about adding to it. And we would also, I think, like to either add better multi-line support, which is kind of mediocre right now, or also that you can have scripts using this Dino syntax outside of your pixi toml eventually and just reference them. And then I think that would make sense to me, at least.
Cool. No, it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you do the pixi shell to activate the environment, it's kind of a sub shell, right? So instead of deactivate, I can just do Control D to leave the shell, and I'm on the same terminal. And I kind of love that, because I used to have this concept way back, and then moved to Conda, had Conda activate, Conda deactivate, and all that.
I think there are a few things that we also still need to improve with the pixi shell. Like sometimes the PS1 is a bit messed up, but our main thing is that we don't want to have to change your bash RC or ZSH RC, and everything should be encapsulated, and without any like global injection or configuration, you should be able to use the things as they are. And so that's what we're trying to.
It definitely makes my life much easier when sharing instructions and environments.
I think that was always a bit of a pain point to have this bash RC modification, and then there's some state there, and sometimes it changes and breaks and whatnot.
And another thing that I really love was pixi3. I actually created a whole network X Python script to analyze my environments in the past. If you Google it, you're going to find my blog post from, I don't know, 2014, 2013. And now I can just type pixi3, and I have it right there in a very nice, organized tree of dependencies. It makes so much easier to debug things.
That's awesome. I think if I remember correctly, that was actually contributed by someone that is like completely outside of prefix and everything. So
I think Alex Kearney, right?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He works with me on the Ocean Hack Week, that event that I just mentioned.
Yeah, so we're very lucky to have a few very amazing contributors to Pixi, and also like if someone listens and wants to do some Rust, then we are as welcoming as we can be and helping to get your feet wet.
Yeah, now with all that said, I really like it. It's super fast. I think personally I will use for projects and CIs. I'm just not 100% ready to get the scientists on it yet.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the whole global environment, kitchen sink environments and things like this is something that we heard a few times. And basically a lot of the people at Prefix, they haven't been so directly attached to the Conda projects from the past. I have been very attached to it. So I kind of knew that this would be a thing, but others in the team are only now starting to realize that it might be something that people want. And so we've been very much looking into how we could support a use case like this more. And one thing we're doing for sure is improving the Pixi global story, where sometimes you want to have things like global, like with Pixi global right now, you can only always install one package, but sometimes you want to have some plugins or some like, I don't know, things that interact more with each other. And so that's one thing that we are improving, but we will probably not enable shell for the global environments, but maybe we'll make a separate thing for like having your kitchen sink story, and maybe we just like piggyback on using a pixi toml, but somewhere else essentially, so that it feels like it's like a Conda global environment, but it's actually like a pixi toml that you modify and something like this.
Like the Conda RC, but
yeah,
I think they're all good ideas, but the main reason why I said I'm not ready is because I think we need a cultural shift. Like project-based ideas are better, are more reproducible, are easier to debug, easier to distribute. There are other communities out there that already use very similar things like R. You create the R project and you have everything in there. And I try to teach people to use Conda that way. So while I think implementing all those things that you said, it's nice, My suggestion was going to be, we need to teach people. We need YouTube videos, we need tutorials. Software carpentry has this incubator lessons, maybe put a lesson in there and teach them how to use these things.
Cool idea, yeah.
Community outreach. So you might say, this is how you used to do things.
Yeah.
Have you tried this? It may be better. Cultural shifts are hard, takes time, and takes a lot of patience and teaching. For example, I was not ready to teach pixi at that event, Ocean Hack Week, but Alex is going to be doing that this year.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
Maybe the next generation using project-based approach is going to be just natural.
Yeah, no, that's a very good comment, and I think that's something that we're trying to work on. Definitely.
I usually approach this philosophy, but thanks to Saramago, the writer, Nobel Prize winner from Portugal. Brazil and Portugal had this 3D Pact to 1995, where they unified the syntax. It's one written language. It's the same now. From 1995. Still today, very few people use it because it's a cultural change. It's super hard. And Saramago said that very well, in my opinion. He said, this is not for me. This is for the next generation. I'll keep writing the way I do. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. It's not for me. New generation, here you go. Learn it and take the word.
Yeah, awesome.